question. To actually come up with the formula for this, it's a z-score that we're actually calculating because we're doing a z-test with proportions. And the actual formula by symbols would look like this. It would be the statistic, the difference between the numbers here, the percentages here, minus the difference from the null, overall difference from all birds on those islands that are tagged. And then we're going to be dividing by a standard deviation. And by looking at the way the hypothesis statement started off, we're assuming that the two populations are exactly the same in terms of the percentages of birds that are tagged. And to do that, then we can use the special case on the formula sheet, which looks like this. Now, the P here is actually going to be a pooled proportion. And we're allowed to use this formula because the null statement said that the percentages were equal overall, percentage tagged on both islands. So to actually calculate the pooled P that you're going to be using here, you're going to be taking the 12 that are tagged with tags and the 35 that are tagged there and dividing it by the 180 plus the 220. Now, a lot of this stuff is unnecessary if you end up using the calculator to do the work in terms of the mechanics. So it ends up being 0.1175. So it's a pooled standard deviation or pooled percentage. All right, so regardless of how you plug the numbers in, and this will be a 0 because it's coming from our null, that there's no difference between the two. You'd put the percentage 12 over 180 into here, 35 over 220 in here. This number here would go in both places, here and here. And NA and NB would be your 180 and your 220. When all that's said and done, either whether you're using the calculator or you're using calculations by just a normal calculator, you end up getting a z-score that's sort of on the outskirts. We're going to turn that z-score into a p-value using the normal curve. Again, make sure you draw the normal curve. Say what kind of normal curve it is. Here's a normal curve. It's a standardized normal curve with 0 as the mean and 1 as the standard deviation. You draw a nice, healthy, normal curve. It'll help you communicate your answer as well. So we're talking about a z-score, a standard deviation that's pretty close to 3 in both directions. Okay, we're going to be using both the positive and negative value of that z-score because we're dealing with a two-sided test. So this probability here plus this probability here will actually be our overall p-value. And you could generate that using normal CDF commands on your graphing calculator, or you could also just get away with using the calculator's statistical menus. So as you can see here, I've accessed by pressing Stat and sliding over to Tests. I've accessed the menu on how to actually calculate the values. And if you slide all the way down to a two-proportion z-test, you can see that I already typed in the information necessary to get the correct answer. If you go down to Calculate, without pressing the wrong buttons on top of that, press Enter. It ends up giving you the same z-score that I just calculated. It also gives you the p-value as being less than 0.5%. And it also gives you the other information about your other percentages from your statistics. And you can see if they've even given you the pooled estimate right there, just at a touch of a button. And the other information there is there too. So you want to make sure you capture all that information down as you write it out. The p-value ends up being approximately 0.004. And then you're on to the last step, is just to summarize what's happening. So the last wave of it is just to actually state your conclusion. The fourth step would be, since the p-value has been calculated, and see how I've written it down. This is the p-value, I'm making it very clear. Since the p-value is less than 10% or less than 1%, we have a significant result. P-value is low, so we're going to reject the hoe in favor of the idea that the percentages that are tagged in each island are different overall. And the question is, can you estimate the number of birds on island A based on the fact that they initially tagged 200 birds to begin with? To solve this question, all it is some cross multiplication. We have 200 birds that were tagged from the start, but we don't know how many birds there were total from the start. Now, the next time they went back to the island, they ended up tagging 12 birds out of 100. They ended up finding that there were 12 birds that were tagged out of 180 total birds. So with a little cross multiplying, you end up getting that 3,600 or 36,000 equals 12n, dividing by 12 ends up giving you that there were 3,000 birds possibly in total on the island. Well, finally on question C. Question C was asking if there was an issue with the way that these birds were caught, and if these birds aren't a simple random sample, then obviously the calculations have lots of room for error. And the AP provided in their rubric several explanations of problems that could arise. And here are some of them. Number one, what happens if they wait too long and new birds are born? And if you got a bunch of baby birds hopping around or flying around, they're not going to have tags on them, so that's going to affect the number of birds that you catch with tags on them. Other situations involve perhaps the birds that are tagged are the slower birds or the birds that are more easily caught. And if that's the case, if you caught them the first time, you're going to catch a greater amount of them the second time around. Other problems that could arise would be that maybe if a bird's been tagged, maybe that ruins their chances for survival because perhaps the tag is bright enough or slows them down to the point where they're more easily caught by prey. And then what do you have? You've got a tagged bird that's in some sort of digestive system of some other creature that you're never going to be able to catch again. So it gives you less likely chance of catching a tagged bird in that situation. So those are just some of the examples that could possibly influence the calculations. And hopefully I can provide some more AP practice questions and answers on future videos. So good luck studying.